Like I can get most things shipped to my door in 2 days.
Yeah, right.
And does that have something to do with the discontentment? And maybe the answer is maybe, but people I don't think have changed that much. And you look at Adam and Eve in the garden, and they're in the presence of God. And what did they say? I think God's holding out on me.
I wish I could have just a little bit more.
Yeah, I just want a little bit more. And that fruit over there, like I think God he's holding out on me, and there's more to be had.
Welcome back to the Journey Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler.
I'm Abigail.
And I'm Caleb.
Nice. Well done. Well done. We got Caleb here today. We're going to be talking about satisfaction or contentment. What does it mean to be happy with the circumstances that we have? How do we learn to live in the moment and not constantly think about what's next or what could be different?
Your life, your journey starts now.
This is Caleb, our guest for today. He is, he was the best man at my wedding. He is helped lead me to Christ. He's also a coffee maker extraordinaire, new dad. This is a fun story. Maybe this makes it in the podcast, maybe it doesn't. I think we should.
Oh, gosh.
This will just give you an idea of where we were at when we met each other. But we went to a church conference together once, and Caleb had gotten really good at throwing cards.
Okay, what is that?
Taking a playing card and throwing
you
it so
actually
that you
just
could
throw a
throw it
card?
like a dart, kind of.
You
right?
get it to spin, and you like.
That's
So
actually sick.
we were across a parking lot from each other, and he threw a hotel key card, which is significantly thicker than a playing card. And he threw a hotel key card at me across a parking lot, and he hit me dead between two of my ribs, and it cut me. I was wearing like a normal t-shirt. It not only did it cut the t-shirt, it cut my skin between the rib, like I was bleeding.
What? How far apart were you guys?
We were probably a good 10 to 15 yards away from each other.
Not like a great judgment moment on my part, but in my defense, I was
You were
16,
yeah,
15.
probably younger than that even, yeah. So, but Caleb did help lead me to Christ. So I've talked about this a little bit before, but I didn't grow up in a Christian household, right? We were just not necessarily in a negative context. We just we weren't church people.
Yeah.
It wasn't really part of our life. And Caleb and a couple of our other friends invited me to youth group on a weekly basis for probably an entire school year. And they would invite me, and I was mean to them. I was not quiet about the fact that I thought that believing in God was silly.
You were like a nominal atheist. You atheist in name. You didn't really know what you believed, but you were like, my dad said we're this, and that's what I am.
Yeah. And so I would give them a hard time because they constantly invited me to youth group. But yeah, I don't know. What was your experience of that? I've told the story before, but I've never heard you tell it.
Oh man. Well, I mean, it was kind of one of those things where it wasn't just me. I think you might have given me the yes.
That's true.
But there were a group of us who we just loved you.
Yep.
And we just loved having and spending time around you. And the best thing that we could imagine is man, what if Tyler were here? And we'd be a youth group, and we'd be like, shoot, what if Tyler were here?
Right.
And I think there's stuff that I would even do differently in that. Like what if instead of just yearning, we had been praying for you?
Yeah.
And we weren't. But we were in the 7th grade,
right?
And we were just shoot, it'd be pretty fun if Tyler was here. That'd be great.
Right. How did you respond to getting no, whether it was from me or other? Because I think it's important, right? You have a relationship with somebody, and you care about them, and you want to help them. You want them to know the God that you know, but then they say no to you, or what I would sometimes do, say no and include some kind of insult with it. So how did you respond to that? What allowed you to not get discouraged?
Yeah, and I think you might be remembering yourself a little bit meaner than you were, because even then you were pretty mild mannered.
Yeah, that's fair. I was probably
you don't
meaner.
seem like a person who would do that.
I was probably meaner about it to some of the other people because I was close with Caleb. But I remember saying some stuff to a couple of the ladies that were in that group that was not the nicest thing I could have said.
Oh yeah, well you should have said that to me and not them.
Yeah, hindsight.
Just hurting some feelings.
Right.
You gave no's, but we were still friends. We were still tight. And I think we would have conversations that were along those spiritual lines.
Yeah.
And so I think you never said, hey, you need to stop asking me.
That's true.
You were just I don't want to go. And so I think in that way, like, it was clear even to like a 7th grade to me that like, okay, this guy is thinking about it. Like, this is not a situation where he's so hardened toward the gospel that that you refuse outright to come in or to hear anything.
Right.
But you were leaning in. You just were wrestling with what would it actually look like if I did join this. And I think that's what's going on. It was a long time ago. But
Wait, so when did you give your life to Jesus then?
Probably about a year after I started going
Yeah.
to youth group. So I at the time, you know, I think I was 15, almost 16. It was at a church
So
camp,
like
but
relatively young. I mean,
yeah. Right.
what do you think was the biggest like change, like mind shift change?
For me,
Yeah.
I think probably in large part, and I wouldn't have said this to you at the time, even after I did become a Christian, but looking back, I stopped looking at the world as if I was the center of it. Now, no one probably would have ever accused me of being selfish. Like, I was nice enough in my manners to not come across that way. But I did I thought about my life primarily in terms of how does this affect me?
Yeah.
What do I get out of it, or how is it going to cost me? And so, not even in a vindictive way, but it was just kind of like that. It was like, and like a lot of people, I think I just viewed the world as if I was the main character.
I mean, it makes sense.
And so after, finding a relationship with Jesus, my mindset was shifted towards, okay, so everything's not actually about me. There's more to this life than just satisfying my own desires.
Yeah.
And so it really changed the way that I think about people. It changed the way that I think about my own time and energy, even my own purpose in life. Your purpose changes when it's not primarily about getting what you want, but about loving people the way that Christ calls you to. And so I think a lot of that is just come from understanding who Jesus is and having a relationship with him.
Yeah, and what about you? When did you give your life to Christ?
I had kind of grown up in a Christian family, and like was raised, and we were at church every Sunday, and that was just the expectation. And so like I knew the stories, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And so I was at a church camp, and by and large, I was a kid who was super angry. I was very mad at the world and at people because I constantly felt rejected.
Yeah.
And I constantly felt like I don't know how I fit in.
Yeah.
And I say the wrong thing, and like people, I don't know when it's the wrong thing when I say it, and then people don't want to spend time around me. And so like that, my response to that as a young person is like, I'm mad. Like I just feel completely rejected.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. And am I just better off like isolating myself from people? And so that's where I was at. And I'm like in the 6th grade, going into 7th grade, and I went to a church camp. And the people there didn't treat me like that. I didn't act any different than I did out in the world. But
They were just nice to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and they just bore with me patiently, because it
Yeah.
wasn't that I didn't like have some. I mean, I'm in the 6th grade, like right. I'm 12 years old. Like,
Yeah.
I
Every
did
12-year-old's a
say the
little
wrong
weird.
thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I did say like even stuff that like should have been discouraged.
Yeah.
Like you would have been like, it's not just I was picked on. Like I just said random.
You just
crap.
chose violence.
Yeah,
You just
I just-
wanted
yeah.
the chaos.
Yeah.
Whatever
a
came
little
to your
bit.
mind was coming out of your
Yeah,
mouth.
it was
That's-
pretty much that.
Yeah.
Whatever came to my mind, whatever it was, I was saying it, and like.
That's not always great.
The point is that it wasn't so much just that like everyone in the world was a jerk but it was more that like these people saw that I was inconvenient and they stuck around.
Right.
And these people were patient with me. And there was correction. Like I remember, Casey Gaylord.
Yeah,
So he
good
was in
friend.
my huddle, my group that year, and a big witness to Christ's love that year was Casey going like, hey, like now's not the time for it. And when I would get upset and like kind of try to isolate, he would be like, no, like you're okay. I want you here.
Right.
But you need to recognize when this thing is appropriate.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, no one had ever borne with me to that second step.
Yeah. So in
Of-
like what you said, this was 6th grade, you went to this Christian camp and then you were shown like the love of other Christians and how they should act. And so after that, like you had that like mind shift
Yeah.
switch where it's like, oh, these people, you know, they love me even when I
Yeah.
mess up, even when I do the wrong things.
Yeah.
But they also love me so much where it's like, hey, you can't do that anymore. It's not socially acceptable. People are not going to like you if you do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so like when you know, finally came to this realization, I think I had kind of like a similar like thing that happened to me. And I realized that one of the things that I have been working on is my contentment.
Yeah.
And like even like as a Christian, like I mess up all the time.
Yeah.
And like I'm a lot angrier than I should be. I'm a lot more unkind than I should be. And that really hurts me and my family and my friends.
Yeah.
And I've been learning how to be content and focusing on God even when I don't see, you know, how can this get any better? And so like
Yeah.
for you, like obviously right after that you probably still were angry sometimes and you still had issues, but how do you like keep your focus on God and keep your focus on relationships with other people even when it's hard?
Yeah, and that was certainly something that I had to grow in. And there was some immediate changes after because that summer I accepted Jesus. I saw that like, hey, what these people are doing, it's not really them. Like they, because of the way that they have been loved by God through his son, like they are a new creation and they've been changed. And there's some of that you experience right away, but there's also some of that you like have to you fight for.
Yeah. It's a process, and sometimes a painful process at that, truthfully.
Part of what my anger is that I was discontent with how people saw me, and I really wanted people to see me a certain way.
Yeah.
Or I was discontent with my, call it status, social status. Like when I reflect and I think about who I am, do I impress myself?
Right.
And
You weren't popular per se.
I was not popular.
Yeah.
No. And honestly, I'd love to say that right after that, wow, I just gained a biblical understanding of what it would be like to be valuable to God and not care about what other people say. But that's not how it looked.
All your problems just immediately went away forever.
They didn't. They didn't. And even though like Christ had resolved a lot of that anger, I still needed to learn and understand that like, oh, I don't need those things. Like that's not where true contentment would come from. Or a word that we'd kind of thrown around before was like satisfaction.
Right.
And like, oh, if I was openly being satisfied in what Christ is offering me constantly as someone who's been saved and adopted by him, then I wouldn't be looking for satisfaction out of the world. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a lot of what kind of in that season of life when I like was being drawn to the Lord too. I think it's not abnormal, especially when you're young, but even in the adult world, you see this all the time.
Yeah.
Looking for satisfaction in things like what people think about you or how much money you have, or you know whether or not this person is romantically interested in you, or your achievements or your success by worldly standards. That's pretty common, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of people search for those things for satisfaction, and yet I don't know, you look at the state of the world, and I would say that a lot of people are pretty unsatisfied. I mean, we were talking about this before.
Yeah.
I wrestle with, are people less satisfied today because we have so many more things? I mean, you think about the number of possessions you have, the amount of like stuff that you have, and then compare that to what someone would have had like 300 or 400 years ago. Night and day difference. We have all the comforts the world could offer us, and yet people still seem pretty discontent or unsatisfied.
Yeah.
And my thought was like, oh, like the possessions we have and the comforts we have in life are making us more discontent. And Caleb brought up this point to me, like, it might not be that the stuff is making us lose satisfaction. It's that we've been trying to fill that need for satisfaction with stuff as the world has developed, and it's not worked. But we just can't seem to learn the lesson, and we keep trying to add more and more stuff to try and make ourselves happy.
Well, when you think about how the Bible portrays this on its very first pages, like, because Tyler, you're asking the question of well, is it related to the amount of stuff and the access and the speed? Like, I can get most things shipped to my door in 2 days.
Yeah, right.
And does that have something to do with the discontentment? And maybe the answer is maybe, but people I don't think have changed that much. And you look at Adam and Eve in the garden, and they're in the presence of God. And what did they say? I think God's holding out on me.
I wish I could have just
yeah.
a little bit more.
Yeah, I just want a
Yeah.
little bit more. And that fruit over there, like, I think God he's holding out on me, and there's more to be had.
Right.
And they take of the fruit.
Right.
And so I don't think that this is like an our era thing. Maybe it's more clear. But I think people have struggled with being satisfied in God from the start.
Right.
And like that's in some ways like a root
Yeah.
of sin all over.
Yeah, can I be honest with you guys?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm like struggling with right now, contentment wise, is my friendships.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I've like been pinpointing it, and I'm thinking about this. And like anytime like I go anywhere, like church or just like to get food with like people,
Hanging out.
I always feel like afterwards, like or beforehand, I always expect like, okay, what do I want to get out of this? What do I want to give to these people? And then afterwards, like I realize like, oh, I'm not content because I feel like I wasn't seen, or maybe like there was something that I didn't expect to happen. And I've realized that that's not a great way to look at people in such a transactional way.
Yeah.
And then also like it's kind of hard to like stop it. Like I just like I want to have like that perfect relationship with someone, but like I don't think that's possible for humans.
Yeah.
And that's difficult. And I don't know how to, like, I've been like dealing with it and like going to God and whatnot, but I know so many people out here are struggling with the same exact thing. It's so common. It's every person has it. We all have a hole in our heart that we're trying to fill. So what would you guys say for people like me?
Yeah. I think because we're describing the same thing, like Adam and Eve in the garden. Hey, I have a relationship with God, but I'm seeking something else. And it's like, what would have perfectly satisfied Adam and Eve in the garden? God would have relationship with God.
And they had each other. He even said it's not good for them to be alone, so I'm going to make them for one another. You know? So he had provided really everything they needed to be satisfied. They just kept looking in the wrong places.
And so to you, I'd be asking like, what are you looking for out of your friendships?
I would say openness, the ability to say exactly what I think. And also, okay, one of the things that I've realized that a lot of people don't have, a lot of relationships don't have, is as someone like I like to talk. Like I'm a talker, but not everything I say I actually believe because I haven't hashed it out.
Yeah.
And so I want to have a relationship where I can mess up and say something that's like wrong that I don't actually believe to be true. Okay. And I want to have someone to hash that out with, to tell me, hey, that's not correct. Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing, is being open to people and feeling rejected because, you know, they're coming back so tense. Yeah. So I'd say that.
So it sounds like genuineness, some grace.
Yep.
Hey, like I can say the wrong thing and it's not the end, and like trustworthiness. And I would say it is a good and right for you to desire friendships that reflect that, but they're good because they reflect the relationship that's possible with God. And yeah, Tyler.
Yeah, I would say, you know, to some extent, expecting those things from your friendships is good and right as long as you don't expect them in perfect measure. What I mean by that is like you can have friends that are open, and you can have friends that are graceful, and you can have friends that are wise. And those are all good. But if you expect them to be perfectly open or perfectly graceful or perfectly wise, then you're going to fall into this trap of like, oh, I'm always like not satisfied with my friendships.
Yeah.
And so understanding one, that, you know, people are imperfect, but two, that like if you can if you allow yourself to place those needs and those desires first upon the only one who can actually satisfy them, then when you have them in smaller measure with your friends, with other people around you, then, you know, if things don't go the way you want, it won't be disappointed. Because if you think about it, I think a lot of the reason we put a lot of pressure on friendships, not just romantic, but we put a lot of pressure on our connections with other people, because we're seeking something, that we're seeking like a level of meeting our needs and kind of being what we need them to be. And the hard part about that is people mess up and they don't, and we can't read each other's minds, and so there's all of these like opportunities for us to disconnect.
Yeah.
And so if you are looking to people for something that only God can provide, like a type of welcome, being welcomed into God's arms regardless of if you've messed up or said something wrong, then you're kind of putting pressure on your relationships for those people to be God in your life. And so it's not fair to you because you're going to be unsatisfied, and it's not fair to them because they're going to they can't be God for you. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but I think just in general, people do that a lot.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, from a relationship standpoint, I would seek first the kinds of relationships that provide the things that you're looking for, but I wouldn't expect them right away. Meaning, like, if you have a new friendship, it's okay if a new friendship starts off light and then develops into something deeper. And I think, at least for me personally, I'm so quick to want all of my friendships to be as deep as they can possibly
Just a
be.
deep guy.
Right. And that, yeah, right. No, I wish. But those kind of things take time. And so I think, the benefit to something like getting coffee with someone using the journey books is that it's kind of helping you move towards those deeper conversations without feeling like you just jump right into hey, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets, Abigail.
That's a great point. You have to have trust.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah,
And
I
trust
can't believe I
takes
didn't think of
time.
the word trust, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And we can have trust for our relationship with God is displayed what has God done for us? He's crossed the universe. He's taken on human flesh. He has died for our sin, and trust in our other relationships is felt out.
Yeah.
There's a pastor in Iowa City who I heard this from, and Timothy Keller has said something along these lines before, but it's one of the most crushing things you can say to somebody who you're in a relationship with, whether it's marriage or friendship, is make me happy. You make me happy. And it's you weren't made to delight in a person. You were made to delight in God. In a way, that's the tragedy of sin.
Right.
Is that you are now separated from a God you were made for.
All right, I'm going to stop us right here, and we're actually going to go into part 2 of this conversation, so stay tuned for part 2. But if you like this episode, if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, make sure that you follow us on wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and we would love to hear from you, whether it's in comments or you can go over to journeycoaching.org and submit your thoughts or questions or anything you want to see us talk about. We would love to connect with you in that way and help you get on your way to building relationships and growing as well. So go over journeycoaching.org and we'll see you in part 2.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next time and make sure you like and subscribe. Visit us at journeycoaching.org and check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Start your own journey at journeycoaching.org.
Your life, your journey starts now. Ba-da-ba-da-ba.